Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer, here with Mike Gallagher to talk Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Miami Heat advanced past Boston to face a well-rested Denver Nuggets team. In the show, we'll talk injuries and potential rotation changes. A little bit of a hint, but we'll save some of that for behind the paywall for the DFS subscribers on our show tonight at 5. With me to talk through it, as always, Mike Gallagher. Mike, how are you?
Doing great. Definitely enjoying some downtime. Been a lot of hiking. I've walked, hiked, jogged 10 miles per day the last 2 days without NBA on. So
Wow.
been enjoying it. Yeah, it's been an active time. I always June and July are the hiking months. I love the heat.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of loving the Heat, let's start there from an injury report perspective. They are the only team with any sort of injury report here because Denver, with the advanced rest, has nobody listed. So on the Heat's injury report, they will still be without Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo, though it sounds like Tyler Hero may return at some point during the series. A target of Game 3 is the hope. They have listed with available tags Gabe Vincent, Cody Zeller, and Bam Adebayo. We've seen these Bam Adebayo and Cody Zeller available tags listed pretty consistently. The Gabe Vincent one is a new one, a downgrade from the questionable tag that he was dealing with at the end of that Boston series. So good signs there for Gabe Vincent in terms of his health, getting the upgrade to available. Any injury notes you want to talk through on the Heat?
Yeah, just the K tape on Bam. Curious to see if he still has it after a couple days off here. Looked a little bit better after kind of fumbling around at times in the Boston series. So looking for that. Of course, the Jimmy ankle. He got asked about it yesterday. He says he's fine. Says nobody cares. People care. We definitely care about Jimmy's ankle, Jimmy. But so yeah, should be good. Expecting pretty big minutes out of those two guys. Definitely concerns on Gabe. We saw light minutes didn't close really for the first time. Obviously, it was garbage time, but the closing lineup wasn't going to be him on there. I believe. So something to watch there. We talked a lot about it on the podcast, how they may have to play a little bit bigger. Sure, Gabe has some size on Lowry, so curious to see how Lowry fits in this. If Gabe is 100% there, but yeah, the other rotation note, it looked like Caleb Martin had a starter's jersey on, based on him and Love having different color jerseys. Bam and Caleb had the same color jersey, the black one. So definitely expecting Caleb Martin to get the start. And we think Love's coming back to life. He had a question. He had a question about it, and he kind of tipped his hand a little bit, saying that they were going to play a little bit bigger. He had a comment about Time Lord being a bad matchup for him, which we talked about. So yeah, on the same page there. We're kind of expecting Kevin Love to make a comeback off the bench.
Yeah, and you mentioned Gabe Vincent not on track to close in Game 7. I think that had more to do with Kyle Lowry just playing so well. They were really,
Mhm.
really effective in the minutes that Kyle Lowry was out there. You can see a
Yeah.
team high plus 26 in his 24 minutes. Some of that aided by garbage time, but I think it's a combination of if Kyle's cooking, why push Gabe on
Mhm.
kind of the bulky ankle? Yeah, and as you allude to, we'll see Kevin Love back in. As a reminder, generally after teams come out of a deep series, the minutes on the starters tend to loosen as opposed to tighten. It tends to tighten as the series goes on. Miami is pretty thin, but I believe that they are going to use parts, and they do routinely use early parts of series to try to test out things that they want to get looks at on film to see if it could potentially work deeper in the series.
Mhm.
And so I would not be surprised to see, we saw Bam, Jimmy, Caleb all touch mid 40s. Would not be surprised to see if those are down closer to 40 instead of mid 40s, or maybe even
Mhm.
upper 30s in these cases as they try to get different looks. And especially that the role of defending Nikola Jokic, I think they're going to want to get a lot of different looks at it just to
Mhm.
see put something on film that Spo can look at, and the Heat coaching staff can look at to assess potential adjustments going forward. Certainly, Bam will draw the bulk of that matchup, but I wouldn't be surprised if early in the series it's not a straight Bam matching Jokic's minutes, but that we get
Mhm.
there later in the series. And the only reason I'm saying that is simply because I think it's more valuable to get the information than necessarily maximizing the EV of the game it depends on the game situation, the game script. The Nuggets are 8.5-point favorites here. But that's my thought on, we'll see some Kevin Love on Jokic, I would imagine, at some points. And then we'll see if they go to any of their switching and fronting
Mhm.
stuff. They've tried to switch a lot of the Jamal Jokic two-man stuff, which leaves Bam on Jamal, which is fine, but often leaves like Jimmy Butler or Caleb Martin or somebody on Jokic, and that has usually been a problem. So we'll see if they try to use some of that stuff with fronting and different things to try to keep the ball out of Jokic's hands. But would
Yeah. Well,
expect just generally the rotation to loosen up a bit as we get
mhm.
starting a new series.
Yeah, Bam is definitely the best answer, but we talked a lot about this when we kind of thought that Gabe wasn't going to be such a big wing defender. We thought Bam may pick up some perimeter stuff, and he kind of didn't. Now we know he has to guard the ball a lot. So you're
Right.
taking away a lot of defensive integrity in doing that because he's such a key piece of putting out fires and all that. So he has one big 4 alarm fire to put out in a 2-time MVP, but it's going to be tough to put out the other ones. Jamal Murray definitely could shoot some fire arrows like in the medieval times or what Gladiator they shot those in like the opening credits. But yeah, definitely huge burden on Bam. You and I disagree on like one thing. I think Bam's ceiling is just a little bit higher than you think, just because I think that he's clearly their best option. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Haywood Highsmith go out there just because he's got length. He's got he's got a lot of handsy kind of move, maybe kind of get in there and disrupt Jokic with the high dribble stuff since he's so much taller. That's kind of something I'm looking out for. So I think I would, if I had to rank who's filling in, I'd probably go Love, Highsmith, Zeller. I feel
Yeah.
very strongly Zeller just has no business playing in these last 2 rounds. I mean, it was clearly a mistake. He played 2 minutes of game 6, got booted in game 7 for Haywood Highsmith.
Yeah.
So I think Love's almost a lock. And then I think Highsmith, and I still don't think Zeller's going to play.
Yeah, and if you look at the past matchups for the Heat, a lot of the second unit centers have been bigger bodies
Hmm.
that they've sort of used Zeller as like he's the default big body that we have left, and that worked okay against Bobby Portis, against Isaiah Hartenstein. Didn't work as great against Time Lord, but they still were able to steal some minutes here and there earlier in the series. Denver's not playing a second unit traditional big. They're
Hmm.
generally playing Aaron Gordon or Jeff Green at that center position, depending on how you view it between those two. It would seem like it's just a much, much worse spot for Cody Zeller to potentially get any minutes. The only potential in my mind is if they decide they need to just try a different body on Jokic for a few
Hmm.
minutes and give Bam a breather or different things like that. Because the thing you have to take into account with the whole thing is now Bam is generally good at staying out of foul trouble, but
Hmm.
the Nuggets are going to put him in a ton of different actions, and there's going to be a lot of defensive action and requirement there. And if there's any sort of foul trouble, I think that's the path to Cody Zeller playing.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I agree with you that I think it's probably not a Cody Zeller series, would be my guess.
Yeah, and I think Love definitely in the non-Jokic minutes. There won't be a lot of them, but I think it's
Yeah.
really clean to put him in there. Certainly don't have to worry about Jeff Green kind of making you pay for having Love. They're not going to use Jeff Green in a lot of actions or anything. So definitely kind of a little hiding place for him there to get 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe more. And then we talked a lot about it. I listened to Zach Lowe's pod on the hike, and you and I talked about Caleb Martin kind of slotting in rotationally as a
Yep.
guard. He
Yeah.
mentioned it. He said it was overthinking it, which I don't think it is. I think that they
Yeah.
need size, and I think that Strus hasn't really been great. I still think he's kind of, and we talked about this too on the pod, where we think that they're kind of going in that way. But I won't be surprised, is because you're going to need size. That Kevin Love rebounding lineup's been pretty good, best rebounding lineup defensively in the playoffs among I think like 60 qualifiers. So you got to think different. Like there's a reason why they're minus 460. I think they kind of know that they really got to pull out some stops. We talked about Denver having a lot of time to get tape. Hey, come up with stuff they don't got tape on. It would
Yep.
be something I would think about. So I think we're going to see some really, and that's what Miami does, right? They're so good at thinking outside the box. Maybe we see a box and one, sticking with the box stuff. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what Spo has up his sleeve because we know he definitely has something.
Yep. It'll be very interesting. The last thing before we transition to Denver, which will be a little bit more brief, but wanted to get your thoughts on just altitude and the altitude
Hmm.
factor for Miami. Um, how do you think, if at all, that impacts minute ceiling on players? Do you think we'll see a quicker hook in the first quarter as guys try to get their wind in that first and second quarter? What are your thoughts on how altitude could potentially play a role for Miami and the minute ceiling of their main guys tonight?
I kind of don't. I listen to JJ Redick, Jerry Mon, and a lot of other players talk about it, even like post gamers. They say that it kind of gets to them early, and then they kind of like work their way out. So yeah, maybe like a little quicker sub in the first quarter, but I wouldn't take more than like a minute or a half a minute off minutes projection, just because they just have nobody. I just don't think that they can afford to play these dudes who aren't great rotation. I mean, Kevin Love got freaking cut by the Cavs. So I just don't think I think the Nuggets are too good that you just got to put your best foot forward. And a tired Bam Adebayo is better than a rested Kevin Love.
Perhaps when bigs lose the gas tank when it goes empty, it's done, and so
Mhm,
I think it is something to monitor. I think there's a lot of things pointing to challenges for Miami in game one here.
mhm,
Game seven kind of hangover. That's a thing that has generally played out in series before. They're going into altitude. They're less rested. They had
mhm,
basically one travel day than a practice day. We'll see. And Denver likes to push pace. We'll see if Denver is able to
mhm,
push pace and potentially, catch Miami needing to catch their breath in the first quarter and in the first half of this game. I think that's an interesting thing to follow. Let's move to the Denver side of things. The big decision on Denver, I think, really is at the end of that Lakers series, which wasn't deep, right? It was just a 4 game series. We saw them basically the last 2 games fully go to a 7 man rotation. And I think the question mark now is, are they going to start with that 7 man rotation, or are they going to, bring back Christian Brown into the rotation as an 8th man? I will say that this is a much better series for Christian Brown to garner some minutes than last series, because last series, like, the primary wing scorer was LeBron, who's just so much bigger than Christian Brown
mhm,
that he's not really adding a lot of value there. Whereas Jimmy is a little bit more appropriately sized for a guy that Christian Brown would defend. So I think that we see some Christian Brown minutes tonight.
mhm.
I think as we get deeper into the series, there's a good chance that those go away. But I think we start potentially with those tonight, and just to once again get more guys and more looks at something on film to throw at Jimmy Butler. So I'd expect that Aaron
Mhm.
Gordon will start on Jimmy Butler. I expect we'll see some KCP on Jimmy Butler, maybe some Bruce Brown, and I do think we'll see some Christian Brown as well. What are your thoughts on whether we see Christian Brown tonight?
Yeah, I'll push. He guarded Kevin Durant primary a little bit in the Phoenix series, so they're definitely not afraid to throw him at an
It's
elite wing scorer.
Yeah. But Kevin Durant is not
Right, I
LeBron
understand. Yeah,
from a size perspective. He's tall,
right.
which is an issue. But I think the bigger thing with Christian Brown is, like, LeBron would just total
Yeah,
body
yeah,
him
yeah,
and take him down to the post over and over again. Whereas Jimmy has strength, but not LeBron's strength, and Kevin Durant
yeah,
has neither of those guys' strength.
for sure. Yep, he doesn't have Greg Oden's strength either. What 80, 85 pounds can bench or whatever.
Yeah.
Get in the gym, Kevin. Kidding. Yeah, I think he's. I think I don't know. We talked about this yesterday. Just like, oh god, don't play with your food, man. Like, don't let Miami win game one again. I don't know. So I'm kind of on the fence. I think I haven't looked at I'm gonna look at our minutes after the show, but I think I would go pretty light. I think it's like kind of coin flippy, just because like they can't lose this game, man. Denver has to kind of put their foot down. They're being so serious with their comments. Listen to all the presser stuff yesterday. I mean, Mike Malone has been. He called Cat like maybe their second best player. He called D'Angelo Russell. That was a guy was supposed to give a lot of minutes. He kind of threw some shade. He's not throwing any shade.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, we respect Caleb. So I think they know how serious this is, and I think again, you're taking Christian Brown minutes, and you're taking them away from these guys who have like clearly earned it and have been really really good. So I'm a little pessimistic on Christian Brown playing you. It sounds like.
I would say I think it's probably 65-35 that he's in the rotation tonight, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, if he gets in the rotation, it's, 50-50 on whether he gets a second half rotation, is what
Mm-hmm.
I'd put it at. So, half the time of that 65%, I'd say it's just a first half rotation and then they move on.
Yeah.
But obviously, the other thing is, if it goes well, then
Mm-hmm.
they were comfortable playing him, 15, 16, 17 minutes in the series against Phoenix when things were
Mm-hmm.
going relatively well. So I think it's really up to, how Christian Brown is defending and how much Miami is helping off of him defensively, and if he's able to make them pay. But I think he's more likely than not to get a shot tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned before that the Denver LA series game 1 felt like a game 5 to me in terms of teams figuring out rotationally that there's just only so many buttons that they can push.
Mm-hmm.
That's unusual. That's not usually how NBA playoff series go. And I know we're in the finals. I know this is the ultimate stage, but generally teams use the early parts of series to try to feel a few things out. And so I think they're more likely to press that button, because if things are going poorly, you don't want to have to press the button like, oh, we're going to try Christian Brown now. Like, you kind of want to see if that can go well before things have gone poorly, would be my guess. So I think we're more likely than not to see him, but I do agree that the leash could be potentially very short on Christian Brown.
Yep.
And I also think, I also think he's a little bit more likely to eat into like Jeff Green's minutes than necessarily Bruce Brown, KCP, Aaron Gordon, MPJ. Maybe Aaron Gordon if Aaron Gordon got into foul trouble or different things like that. But I do think that Jeff Green's size was a really big part of the reason that he played so much in the middle of that Lakers series. Not sure the Heat posed those same types of challenges. Not that Jeff Green won't play at all. I just think the ceiling, which we saw get into, I think he got into the 20s one game. I don't think that's really here in this series for Jeff Green.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to like game 2, game 3 of the Phoenix series, I mean, I remember doing content, and if you guys listen, I was like, oh yeah, when's Peyton Watts going to come in? $1,000 Peyton Watson showdown. Let me get some. So it's not like Green's like earned it. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe they don't need the size, right? We talked about they have Bam, who's not that big. Kevin Love isn't like your classic big man. I don't think Zeller's going to play. They might have Haywood Highsmith center 2 minutes, So you could definitely get away. I wouldn't be shocked. I think that would be aggressive to not have Green in there, but that's something I think could happen.
Yeah, I think that's a late series adjustment type thing if they need to do something there. But again, my thought process on this is we're not seeing the 45s out of Jokic, Murray, and that opens up just a few more minutes to spread around. Those are going to be a few more trial minutes to Christian Brown, Jeff Green, spread out around Bruce Brown, KCP, and so on and so forth, is my guess for what we see game 1. And then we'll see. This is a big task for Miami. They've answered every time anyone has had any question marks about Miami being able to compete, whether it was in Boston where they were huge underdogs, whether it was game 7 after Boston won 3 in a row and they were huge underdogs, whether it was in Milwaukee when Milwaukee was at home in a 3-1 series. Miami has hung around and hung around and hung around. So I don't want to go overboard on the fact that, it's an 8.5 point spread. They're playing a much more rested team. They're going into altitude, all these negative things, because every negative thing you've thrown at Miami so far, they've hung around and hung around and hung around. But that is one of the things that is on the table, certainly as these spreads get a little bit more elevated. We'll see if they're deserving of the elevated spreads. To this point in the playoffs, they have not been. Miami's been undervalued heavily throughout the playoffs.
Hanging around, got the alligator blood for sure.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Definitely. Yeah, it's tough, man. We keep underrating Miami, and God, to be in the finals and to beat Boston, to beat Milwaukee, and to be like almost -500 is so crazy. But it's funny, like most people. And I was listening to Steve Jones, who's like a really sharp Twitter follow, and he was on Zach Lowe's podcast, and he picked Miami. I was like, oh baby.
I was surprised at that too. Yeah,
that I respect anybody's opinion that I like truly respect. I was like, wow, that's spicy. But definitely check that out. That was a great podcast.
Yeah, the Dunked On podcast is great. Highly recommended. It's with JJ Redick's network over there, the Old Man and the Three as well, which is fantastic as well. Although I will say the YouTube titling algorithm on that Michael Porter Jr. Duncan Robinson, the titling was a little misleading over there for JJ Redick's podcast, because it said like Duncan Robinson and Michael Porter Jr. Talk about their matchup in the finals. Neither guy talked about playing the other team in any way, shape, or form, and they weren't on screen together. It was 2 separate interviews that were spliced back together. But congratulations, you got my click.
That's great. That was great. It was funny listening to Duncan. He said that someone put his phone number out. He's a Boston kid, and like apparently his phone got like blown up. That's why he did the Hulk Hogan thing. That was great. Duncan's an entertaining dude, man. I enjoy listening to that guy.
Even Boston fans hate Boston fans, is what we learned from that Duncan Robinson episode. All right. Any other notes before we get out of here?
No, just expecting, Really, I'm hoping a blowout. So I did this in the Cavs series, and I hate myself. I bet Cavs game 1 in series, they both lost. So I bet Denver game 1 in series
Oh,
at like -220. So I thought that was a
I
pretty good
know.
bet. We'll see. So
Well,
rooting for Denver. You're
yeah,
you're going on.
if it is a blowout, then you should come on over to the dark side of more conservative minutes projections
Yep.
that I have been putting in our Slack all day as we've talked through some props and whatnot. All
Yep.
right, as always, support the people who are supporting us. This show is brought to you by our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have daily NBA snake drafts running for money, in addition to many formats of NFL offseason best ball contests, including Best Ball Mania 4, which has 15 million in total cash prizes spread across postseason and regular season winners. If you're playing NBA Pick'em, in-season subscribers can use our tools at ETR to compare ETR projections to their fantasy Pick'em games. If you haven't signed up for Underdog yet, use promo code ETR for a matching deposit bonus up to $100. That's promo code ETR at underdogfantasy.com. Behind the paywall today at 5 o'clock Eastern, myself and Mike Gallagher will be walking through the DFS side of this, the showdown strategy. There is a milli maker in the showdown streets today, $1 million up top. I'm sure it will be duped. If you are able to win this in a unique way, we'll talk about ways that you could potentially do that on the show. So make sure to tune in and get your subscription over at establishedrun.com. As always, if you're uninterested in giving us your hard-earned dollars, we do ask for your hard-earned clicks. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, get notifications whenever we go live. And of course, smash that like button and help feed that algorithm. You feed the algorithm, it helps feed our families, and we keep feeding you the injury information analysis you need to make your spread bets, prop bets, or DFS lineup. So feed that algorithm, smash that like button, nom, 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 nom. We'll see you again next week. We're going to do a DFS show for game 2, but no injury analysis show for game 2. So subscribers behind the paywall, there will be a game 2 DFS showdown show, but for the injury analysis show, we will see you guys next week for game 3. So enjoy the weekend, enjoy games 1 and 2 of the NBA Finals. We'll catch you next time.